I genuinely thought it was satire when a dude said the free market always works and Roosevelt's policies took that all away. And I said that to him. I was like, haha, good one. This is satire, right? And he responded that no, he's not a communist. It doesn't work. Freedom is the only answer, but I, of course, can feel free to prove him wrong. Which was a statement that kind of confused me a lot, because we are not now and never have been communist, even in the height of the New Deal era. And just because the word free is in free market doesn't mean it's the same thing as freedom. But proving people wrong happens to be a pastime of mine, so I pushed through the confusion and started to do the legwork to address his original statement that the free market always works and FDR's New Deal policies ruined that. Like how the unemployment rate was often in the teens and 20s before the New Deal policies. Then once the New Deal policies were implemented and it fell into single digits, it never once again exceeded 8% annual average, except for, during Reagan, when he was axing those policies and it got up past 9%. 10% unemployment was a norm back in the early part of the 20th century. If we had 10% unemployment today, they would overthrow the government. Or maybe poverty rates. The poverty rate in 1900 was like 56%. Last year was like 12.5%. Or farm bankruptcies, since that's what we were talking about in the video you commented on. The decade before FDR and the New Deal policies, 1920 to 1929, there was 52,000 farm bankruptcies. This past decade, there's been like 4,500. Thousands of farm bankruptcies per year used to be commonplace prior to the New Deal. And then there's been, about a couple hundred every year since. Except for once again in the 80s under Reagan, when they shot back up into the thousands because he was, axing New Deal policies. Then it occurred to me that I don't need to dig up all this information. I got a question for you. Don't worry, I'll make it rhetorical in the end so you don't have to think too hard. When FDR was elected in 1933, what historically significant era was our nation in the middle of? I'll give you a hint. It starts with great and ends with depression. So now riddle me this, Jim Carrey. If a depression is what happens when an economy doesn't work, and the free market always works, why was the one time that the economy didn't work the greatest happen when the free market was the freest? And if FDR stopped the free market from free marketing so it didn't work, why has the economy never again not worked as bad as it didn't work before he stopped it from working? Is the answer a newspaper? Oh, sorry, that's a different riddle. Now, there is not a single economic or societal indicator that I can find that suggests that pre-New Deal conditions in any way outperform post-New Deal conditions. I mean, you can find an outlier metric here or there, like a GDP spike one year, unemployment drop during like the Industrial Revolution, but there is not a single broad overarching long-term economic trend that supports this ridiculous statement. And what's more is every single economic downturn we've had since, from Nixon's stagflation to the Reagan recession to the Great Recession, every single one has followed cuts in regulations and cuts in New Deal style policies and programs. And every single overwhelming economic and academic consensus supports that FDR's New Deal policies were wildly successful and trickle-down economics was never going to work. It is basic 101 economics that unregulated free market capitalism always ends in monopolies, and monopolies are not a free market. In fact, free market capitalism left to its own devices always fails. Every single time, there is no way around it. There is not a single historical example of it ever being successful, and there is not a single economic model that ever suggested it would be successful. Don't you remember the stories of Rockefeller and Carnegie and all the robber barons? Like, I want to know, how can you construct a reality in your head that would allow you to believe this? Here we are living through it again, right now, a world of waning regulation and antitrust enforcement and a consolidation of corporate interests. So I don't need to prove you wrong, because history and math and our current hellscape of a reality has done a damn fine job of doing that for me.